President Muhammadu Buhari says the stunted development experienced at the local government level is caused by governors and local government officials who pocket public funds. Buhari criticized state governors over what he describes as their unfair treatment of his regime at the grassroots. The president was speaking at a parley with members of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies.
This administration has done so much in building trust between the government and the people. This report will largely assist in the provision of good governance to the people at the grassroots levels and by extension win back their trust in government. It is obvious that government cannot afford to pay lip service to the recommendation contained in this report. A chief executive of a state a qualified lawyer, trained, the treatment of local governments. What they did, this is my personal experience. If the monies from the federal government to state government, say it's 100 million, let's put it 100 million. 50 million will be sent to the chairman with a letter that he will sign that he received 100 million. It's a terrible thing. You cannot say the person who was doing that was not educated. He was a qualified lawyer. He was experienced. Yet he participated in this type of corruption. So it's a matter of conscience. Whichever level we find ourselves, that you need us to sit here with all the sacrifices the country is making by putting you through institutions and getting you ready to lead. The fundamental thing is personal integrity. May God help us.
On Wednesday this week, the federal government had blamed state governors for being partly responsible for the rising rate of poverty nationwide. The Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Clement Agba, had said state chief executives prioritize the construction of infrastructure such as bridges and airports in cities rather than improving the lives of the rural poor. Here is some of what the minister said.
Government is putting out at the federal level, putting out so much money, but we are not seeing a reflection, so much reflection in terms of money that is being put out in alleviating poverty, which is one of the reasons the government also put in place the National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy. But if the government, federal government, puts the entire income that it earns into all of this without some form of complementarity from the state governments in playing their part, it will seem as if we are throwing money in a pond. Because the governors basically are only functioning in their state capitals. And democracy that we preach about is delivering the greatest good to the greatest number of people. And from our demography, it shows that the greatest number of our people live in the rural areas.
All right, let's cross live to Ebonyi State and speak to the Commissioner for Information, Uchenna Orji. Thank you very much for joining us on Newsnight. I'm sure you've heard what the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning had to say. That's the President of Clement Agba, and the President too has said, look, it's the state governors, they're responsible for the poverty level in the country. They're not living up to their expectation, and prioritizing projects that don't affect the lives of the people in any way or form. How would you react to that?
Thank you very much. Let me say that it does depend on the conception and the perception of the maker of the statement. For me, I could just deduce some level of fallacy of generalization, which perhaps didn't intend to do any harm to any governor. But come to talk of it, I would say that we should have an empirical analysis of issues, especially developmental issues, before we even come out to make, public statements on issues of development as far as they concern jurisdictions. For me, this is a federating state, a federating nation, where each state has its priority needs. And I would say that every responsible and responsive leadership of every state government will need to have what we call need assessment. And this is part of the formation of the manifesto and part of the formation of the blueprint, the policy direction of every government that is coming on board. I would speak only for Ebonyi State to say that in Ebonyi, we prioritize our developmental projects. When the governor came on board in 2015, we had no road connecting to the rural communities. We had practically no infrastructure, talking about road or even other critical economic infrastructure. The governor had to develop his blueprint and had to marshal out his agenda on how to make Ebonyi to be an emerging economy. Having known where we are coming from, a neglected state, so to speak, a peasant state, where we have more of agrarian, farmers. Now, I can tell you that on the issue of prioritization of our projects, the governor thinks that connecting the entire nooks and crannies of the communities that make up Ebonyi State is the way to go. So from every local government, the governor had to put in place 25 number kilometer road, concrete road. Of course, it's a novel that it was only the governor of Ebonyi State that did introduce, and it has 50 years guarantee. And for every federal road, the governor said, no, I mustn't wait for federal government. Whether you're coming from Enugu to Ebonyi, or Abia to Ebonyi, or Imo to Ebonyi, or Benue, or Cross River to Ebonyi. Of course, you are passing through federal road, but the governor had to do those roads. And in most of the cases, he had to dualize. So Ebonyi now is a global village. And the way to go, which is what the governor is doing, is to connect to the rural communities. And I can tell you that apart from connecting the rural communities, the governor is churning the entire 13 local government areas through what is called a ramp road. It's about 189 kilometer road, World Bank assisted. Of course, it's actually a facility that government is paying. And this has connected, for the start, 8 local government area. This was started in the Second Republic, was conceptualized in the Second Republic, as it were, but successive administrations never did until the governor came on board. So in the area of critical infrastructure, that is road, we believe it is the most important. Road before any other thing. Now, what of light? Every local government has no less than 20 kilometer light. And of course, Ebonyi, as small as it is, majority of the parts of the state is rural. And so what did the governor do? Whatever he does for the metropolis, he does for the satellite house and the rural communities. And what he had to do was to develop
Uchenna,
more satellite.
Sorry, I need to cut in here. You're reeling out a lot of achievements. But from the National Bureau of Statistics, recent, outlay of the multi-dimensional poverty in Nigeria, Ebonyi State ranks 5. How, the roads, the lights, the infrastructural development in the state capital, how have they affected the people in the rural communities? How has he empowered them?
Yeah, let me say that the National Bureau of Statistics has severally, under this administration, within this last 7 to 8 years, come up with different, analysis about poverty ratio in different jurisdictions, including Ebonyi State. It was in 2020 that they had the analysis about the states of the Southeast and rate of employment and empowerment, Ebonyi became the second best in terms of empowerment and job creation. So for me, we should appreciate where we are coming from. Before we were the least in the ladder, the least state in the ladder. But if they are talking about people that are not into businesses, if we are talking about lack of industrialization, then one can say, our peculiarity, where we are coming from. And let me tell you, like advanced countries, the way to go is to have aggressive impact in critical infrastructure. It is creation of environment that will bring about job creation, that will bring about industrialization, that will bring about food sufficiency. And this foundation must be laid. Unless you are not a visionary leader that is thinking about 100 years, 50 years. If you are a leader that thinks about maybe next 5 years, next 8 years, then you'll be thinking about just doing the road perhaps in few communities. But we are talking about aggressive infrastructure, economic stimulating, socially and economically stimulating infrastructure. That is what the governor has done. Now, let me tell you, in the next few years, and it has started happening, we will be generating a lot of jobs, a lot of revenue, a lot of industries. Investments will come to Ebonyi State. And we are looking at Ebonyi as an emerging state. We have University of Medical Sciences that we are looking at, that it is going to take no less than 10,000 number jobs, direct and indirect. And it has just started. It's named after Governor Umahi. That's David Umahi, Federal University of Health Sciences. And we have the international market that has already taken no less than 5,000 number market, men and women. So it does depend on your conception. These people are more or less civil servants, and they have their analysis measures or yardsticks or parameters for determining some of this. But look at the situation holistically, what Ebonyi State had.
Right, let's quickly butt in here so we don't just allow you reel on and on. Well, according to the same National Bureau of Statistics, Ebonyi State, at least as at early this year, is the poverty.
May 2022.
May 2022, the poverty capital of the Southeast. And that's not really to discountenance what the president, who has visited Ebonyi State a couple of times, said when he visited, that he was really impressed, commending the governor and his infrastructural strides. Let's talk about agriculture. Abakaliki in Ebonyi State is well known for rice. How has it translated in the lives of the rural populace, really, in Ebonyi State?
Thank you very much. I must tell you that in the area of agriculture, simply put, we have done fantastically well. Before we inherited peasant farmers that were more or less subsistence farmers. But the governor introduced commercialization and mechanization of agriculture and made it compulsory that if you must be a public servant, you must go into commercialization. What it means is that you must have at least a hectare of land. That is no less than 250,000 per hectare, like rice production equivalent. And this has really helped in rice production. For us in Ebonyi, we take rice production as compulsory subject. Cassava, maize, they are elective subjects. And that's why today the Federal Ministry of Trade said Ebonyi State is one of the 3 largest producers of rice. And we have a lot of our processing companies. We have 80 metric ton capacity fertilizer blending plant, the biggest in the whole of southern Nigeria. And that is participating in the presidential rice initiative. It has helped a lot in providing the fertilizer need of the people of the south, southeast, and even southwest. And I can tell you that we have the biggest state-owned rice processing plant. It is having a total of 32 metric ton capacity rice milling clusters per hour. That is the capacity. And we have what is called
I think, Uchenna, we know that if we allow you, you'd go on and on and on, but we still stand by the MBS statistics. We stand with what Mr. President has said about monies to local government not getting to them. They are either halved, and that has really caused, escalated the poverty in the country. But we just have to thank you. Uchenna Orji is the Commissioner for Information at Ebonyi State for joining us on Newsnight.